Manchester United's problem is very similar to Real Madrid. I see as Real Madrid will always want to spend the big money on the big names. Whereas if they were a little bit smarter, they could sign smaller names for slightly smaller money and still round out that squad a lot better, not have the bigger holes. But being Manchester United, they'll also have that premium. It's hard to find names that Manchester United will realistically sign.
Well, you say that. I mean,
not as little money.
They look like they're in the prime position to go and snap up Jadon Sancho now. It doesn't look like Chelsea have any interest in him. He certainly doesn't look to be going back to Manchester City.
But for 120 million.
Yeah, I know, but even so, I mean, if they're gonna bother spending 80 million on Grealish, they should. I would put that money away and spend that on Sancho, who's I think a better. I don't know. I assume we can all agree is a better player than Jack Grealish.
But it's a case of would you rather spend the 120 million on Jadon Sancho, or spend 20 million on a left back, 40 million on a defensive midfielder, another 40 million on a general front three player that can, be backup to Rashford, Greenwood, Martial? Or would you rather splash all that money on one player, a superstar that, sure, he might be a superstar, but is he really going to have that bigger change?
If he's genuinely available for Manchester United to go in for, I think they'd be silly not to jump on that straight away, because then I think they've still got, Eric Bailly. He's not been great. I appreciate that, but I still think these are like redeemable options which they can rely on ultimately down the stretch if they're playing with confidence. I think they really are a team that works with confidence. If you think about the positivity around the club right now, Ed Woodward, I haven't seen his name in the papers for a while, which is always a good sign for United. Suddenly there's Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. No one's saying he's not qualified for the job anymore. It's very positive around Manchester United right now, and that's why I feel if they can continue to capitalise on that, go after Sancho, sign Sancho, and push forward, that could really help, because they are a team that when everyone's in harmony with them, and that includes the press, they are a very difficult team to beat, because like I said, perceptions around that club change very, very quickly. And right now, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. They could go in and get a centre-back and a holding midfielder as well. But if Sancho is there for the taking, I don't see why they wouldn't go for him, because then at least they've got that secure. Then in the long run they can look, because everything doesn't have to happen this transfer window. It's just if in a situation like Sancho, if the opportunity arises, I think they'd be silly not to.
I understand what you're saying there, but in a way with Man United, the question is always, will they screw up a good situation by poor transfer work? Like that's kind of always my worry with Man United, because I think they're in a good moment right now, but when things get difficult, it all immediately turns to shit. Like everybody gets on their back really quickly. Like Ole has had kind of flirtations with the possibility of being sacked before, and it just feels like a run of bad results always puts Man United into a complete tailspin. So I do think they need a really solid summer. I think Sancho would be great. I also think that what Mike's saying would make a lot of sense, to go out and deal with a bunch of areas in the squad. I think the only way they can really screw it up is if they go and say, we are going to go and spend a bunch of money on Grealish. Something like that, which is completely unnecessary and won't improve them at all. So in a way, though, their issues are the opposite of Chelsea's, because Chelsea's form has been much patchier than United's in 2020. But I think when we look at the squad, we see how deep it is. And it looks as well like their transfers put them in a very strong position for next season, wouldn't you say, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, they've already brought in two sort of top quality European players in Hakim Ziyech and Timo Werner. And straight away, just adding those two, you can almost see the project that Frank's building. I know when Lampard came in, it was like, give youth the chance, and all these sort of young players coming through like Reece James, Tammy Abraham, Mason Mount. But adding the quality on top of that still gives the likes of Mount and Tammy Abraham the chance to develop with the club in and around the first team. Because it's not like Werner comes in, Abraham's never going to play for Chelsea again. Ziyech comes in, Mount's never going to play for Chelsea again. If they're going to be in the Champions League, which it looks like on the assumption Manchester City aren't in it, it looks like they will be, then they'll need the depth. They can still give these players the run-outs. But then you hear rumours like they're being linked with Kai Havertz for 80 odd million or so, which would be an insanely good transfer, but not necessarily a smart transfer. Because if you can imagine a front three of, what would it be? Werner, Havertz, and someone else. I don't know, Mason Mount, let's say, as a front three. Ziyech, of course it's going to be Ziyech. But then they have the weaknesses. Like watching them against West Ham last week, as much as I enjoyed watching their defending was absolutely atrocious. They were like, Marcus Alonso would spend more time in our half, in the West Ham's half, than he did sort of defending for Chelsea. Like, the reason West Ham won that game in the end was because there were no defenders. we counter-attacked from absolutely nothing. Yarmolenko had all the space at the left-back position where Marcus Alonso should have been, and, you know, scored from that. So it's very similar to Manchester United, where do you want to spend 80 million on the opportunity that Havertz is available? It looks like Havertz is available for about that much. Or would you rather spend 40 million on a quality left-back, maybe not the 80 million on Ben Chilwell, but sort of a 40 million on someone who can still be a starting left-back, and then maybe just more depth throughout the squad, just another centre-back, because Christensen isn't as good as we thought he was, or thought he was going to be, or it certainly looks like that at the moment. Right back, Azpilicueta is getting on a bit. Reece James is, you know, inexperienced, and they probably need some quality cover at right back. Yeah, I mean, Chelsea look good. It looks very promising for them next season. You'd expect them to qualify for the Champions League next season, but if they don't sort out that defence in some way, I just think they need to buy some more defenders, better defenders, than splash the money on Havertz.
I guess I think I'm a bit more positive than you about Reece James. I think Reece James looks like he's going to be a very good fullback for them. And I really like Tomori as well, plus Rudiger, plus Zuma, plus Christensen. I do think there's enough there. Like, to me, I would definitely think, let's deal with left back. Let's definitely deal with goalkeeper, which is probably the weakest.
Of course, goalkeeper's the one I completely forgot.
But also centre mid. I think, like, look, they have good central midfielders. Loftus-Cheek, though, is more of an attacking mid. And Conte, since he's come back this season, looks less like the superhuman N'Golo Conte that we're used to seeing, and more just like a very, very good defensive midfielder. Like, that could be a big loss for them if their plan is to play this extremely open, attacking style of football. Like, I do think that they might need to look for reinforcements there. But on the other hand, they've struggled with really significant injuries this season. Conte's been out for a long period. Abraham's been out. Pulisic, Loftus-Cheek, Hudson-Odoi. And they've still been one of the better sides in the league across the season. Henry, if you were one of these younger players at Chelsea and you see the work they're doing in the transfer window, would you feel a little bit aggrieved, like your chance is getting taken away?
Yeah, I do think, well, I mean, sort of, it's not the worst situation to be looking at to say, wow, we've got some quality world-class players coming in. I mean, maybe this is an opportunity for them to, you know, they're going to see the standards they're going to now have to reach in order to make the first team, which isn't a bad thing, really. I mean, speaking honestly, this is almost like a blending of the old way that Chelsea did business with kind of the new era under Frank. It's sort of, you're seeing these incredible players coming in, and if they want to be part of that, they're going to have to rise to it. I mean, I still think players are going to have opportunities. You see, you know, he chose Ross Barkley again over, I'm not saying he's a young player, but he chose him again over Kovacic, which is showing he's not just going to go on your name alone. He will give you the opportunity. If you can prove that you are better than these players, you probably will get the opportunity to start. Even Giroud is back in the side at the moment over Tammy Abraham, and he's playing well. He looks good. And I don't think it's just because these players are coming in doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to get game time. He is going to give you the chance to get game time. And as being as cynical as possible, we don't know if Ziyech's going to be able to do the same thing week in, week out in the Premier League that he's been doing in the Eredivisie, because I mean, I read Alan Pardew talking about it, just how the bottom end of the Eredivisie is a lot worse than the top end, in the way that the Premier League and the top 5 leagues in Europe, maybe it doesn't translate to in quite the same way. So it remains to be seen. It's a long old season playing in England, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are lots of variation and change. And I think it will take a while for that next Chelsea team to sort of stabilise, but where they go next. But I mean, looking at their run-in,